Hi everyone, Isabel Fox here. Today I want to talk to you about what I call the escort trap. This is the very common occurrence of the working woman who decides to get into escorting for just 1 year and ends up there for 15 years instead. I'm going to explain exactly why this happens and how it looks. And then I'm going to share with you my 5 strategies to stop you from getting stuck. Let's kick off first by exploring why it is girls get stuck escorting to begin with. If you're looking from the outside in, you might be thinking, how on earth could a girl get stuck in such an obviously problematic line of work? Or you might also be thinking that the answer is clear and simple, and that it must just be because of the money. Well, I'm going to address both thought processes for you, starting with the latter. Money certainly plays a role in it. However, it isn't at the core the number one reason behind getting stuck in escorting. There are actually plenty of jobs that make lots of money. And to the former point, a person's duration in the industry in this scenario is not usually a conscious decision. So it's not like they just decide that I'm going to get stuck in escorting for an elongated period of time. So without further ado, the real reason behind this is that as an escort, there is no real source of accountability. You are, in almost every scenario, only accountable to yourself. Even if you're actually working for an agency or a parlor, it's not like escorting is a contracted job that you're forced to turn up to every day. And it really shouldn't be either for what I think is obvious reasons. Even when you are working for a company as an escort or a sex worker, the accountability levels are very low, and this is because the turnover rate for staff is so high, and the entire nature of the industry is very transient. So ultimately, even if you've missed all of your scheduled shifts for a week, a business will still welcome you back with open arms and with absolutely no recourse because they need you too much to turn you away. They won't have any other girls coming in. They're desperate for workers. They've got clients who are desperate for variety. So they feel like they have no choice but to just let somebody come back even if they haven't abided by their rules. This is, in my opinion, a really short-term way of thinking, and it unfortunately underpins the entire nature of the industry, and it in turn becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that ends in no accountability. So if you've become an escort and you haven't yet learned the skill of holding yourself accountable, you will very likely fall into the escort trap. This then, combined with other aspects of the job, make it even easier for you to fall and stay there. What also influences this issue is the industry has extremely flexible working hours. You can literally work at any time on any day and with no routine or pattern of any kind. Escorting is also an extremely low barrier to entry job. You literally only need to be 18 and free of sexual diseases to work, even in places where it's technically not legal. If you fit that requirement, most agencies or parlors will take you in. There's generally a very high hourly rate in comparison to normal jobs, whether you're working at the lower end or the higher end of the industry. Likely you've gotten into the industry because it pays far more than what you're currently doing. A combination of the above really just facilitates a bad work ethic all round. And lastly, the industry as a whole, as I alluded to, operates on a very now basis. 50% of clients make bookings at the exact time they're feeling horny, and girls tend to work when they immediately need money. So the whole industry is geared toward the same way of operating and thinking, which is on a very short-term basis. All of this is, of course, unless you choose to actively select how you want to approach this occupation and to hold yourself accountable to better work practices. So now, to explain how this whole thing actually plays out for a girl in the industry, I would like to introduce you to Jane. Jane represents 80% of the working girls I have come across in the industry. And we're going to take a cursory overview of 8 years in a life of a Jane. At 22, Jane starts escorting as just a sideline gig to her full-time job. And Jane quickly realizes she can make way more money in an hour than she usually does in a week. When I was 18, I had a full-time job that paid about $800 a week doing your standard 38 to 40 hours. And in my first ever 6-hour shift at a brothel, I came home with $1,000 in cash. I felt like the richest woman on the planet. I laid that money out on my bed. I took a photo of it, and I still have the photo to this very day. Now, after a few shifts like this, Jane decides to quit her day job, and she's super motivated to make lots of money. Look at her there. She's so happy. It took me less than 3 months to ditch my full-time job. I can't remember exactly. It may have even been like 2 months. And it didn't take me or Jane long to acclimatize to this new level of income, which is far higher than the previous full-time gig I had, and has a new level of working hours, which were far lower than my previous full-time gig. Now, back to Jane. For a while, Jane's life is super awesome, and she's living the ultimate escort superstar dream of working minimally yet earning maximally. And she has not a care in the world. Look at Jane, she's escortified now. But let's look at what happens when you actually live a life like this for some time. Because your life no longer requires you to work more hours, your expectation of yourself lowers. And as your expectations on yourself lower, so do your capabilities. Remember that old saying, if you want a task done, give it to a busy person? Well, the same principle is really at play here. And the less you feel you need to do, the less you will actually do, and the less you will feel capable of doing. Now, if I take this to the nth degree, what often happens to people when they expect less and less of themselves and their capabilities drop is that they become more susceptible to anxiety, stress, and problems. There is a really common type of escort who is highly strung, anxious, and depressed all the time. Sadly, this gets incorrectly attributed to the nature of the work, and people assume that they must be suffering from doing something as terrible as exchanging sex for money. In a situation where the person has actively chosen to work and is free of issues that means that they aren't suited to being in the industry at all, then this really isn't true. It's not the actual job that's the problem for these people. It's the whole lifestyle that comes with it, which is the problem. This style of working and the lack of accountability, the secrecy, stigma, and the minimal work hours all leads to many long-term escorts feeling lonely. Humans are social creatures, and the average person really needs a full personal life to feel balanced and happy. Now, all of these things don't just happen right away. It is a gradual process which creeps up on you. As the job is quite lonesome and solitary, most escorts don't really know of anyone or any place or feel like they have anywhere to go to learn better strategies for countering against this. I certainly didn't feel like I had any of that in the industry. I was very fortunate to find people who could help me outside the industry, some who knew what I did and some who didn't. So now let's fast forward to Jane at 30. She's been at it for 8 years now, and unfortunately, Jane is unaware of what's going on and of how her choices will eventually unfold. But guess what the industry is now full of? New 22-year-olds, or girls ranging from 18 to 25. They might be new to the industry, they're vibrant, they're youthful, and they're full of the hunger to work that Jane once had when she was 22 and decided to work as much as she could and make lots of money. Jane, as a result of new competition and her own poor habits, has started to earn less. Jane has no working history that she can actually talk about, or qualifications that she can also talk about, because deep throating is not a qualification you can put on a corporate resume. She hasn't been saving, also because she's been sad and using shiny new things to make herself feel better, and she has plenty of time on her hands to go shopping or spend money on trips around the world. Her cost of living is high, because I'm telling you now that it isn't cheap to maintain an escort's standards, and at this age she's begun to want children. Unfortunately for Jane, getting out of the industry feels harder than ever. And sadly, dating at 30 as an escort is getting harder because guess what? All of her potential partners want to know straight away once they find out that Jane is a working girl. They want to know what Jane's exit strategy is. Some workers will certainly choose not to tell their partners that they work at all. Once you've been an escort for this long, it actually becomes practically very difficult to hide. So there are plenty of escorts who date partners who know what they do. And I can speak to this with first-hand knowledge from dating multiple people who have known that I work and going through the process of telling them I'm a worker, or perhaps I've met them through work. And there are two things a new potential partner will ask me every time we get serious, if they already know, or once I reveal to them that I'm a worker. The first one is always something around how I manage my sexual health and what sort of sexual services I provide related to keeping my sexual health in check. And secondly, they always want to know when I'm quitting. If you are an escort stuck in the escort trap, the likelihood is that you don't have an exit strategy, or you would likely not be suffering all these things or be stuck in this position to begin with. Now, I get this all sounds really bleak, and I probably sound like a major escort hater for painting such a grim picture. But the point behind me sharing all this is really to bring some awareness to the picture so that anyone who is or who might be in this situation, or maybe if you're at the beginning of your escort journey, anybody who's in this situation can take back the control. You can utilize the strategies to change where you're at, and you can actually begin reaping the rewards of escorting, which I truly believe so strongly in. Even though I may not have just made it sound like it, I truly believe that escorting, if it's what you want to do, can be an amazing tool to help you achieve anything you want to achieve in your life, as it did for me. So let's talk now about how you can avoid falling into the escort trap while still taking advantage of the many perks of escorting through your 20s and beyond. The key is really to use strategies which build accountability into your life, going back to our point that the underlying issue here is accountability, while also mitigating the downfall of the nature of the escort lifestyle, which basically is that escorting for the most part is a moderate term occupation. It can set you up, but it usually doesn't keep you going. It's just like being a professional athlete, really. It's not a lifetime career for most people. So strategy number 1 is keep a relevant foot in the real world. And you want to do this both professionally and personally. This will keep your work history up to date. It will give you skills you can promote and also keeps you from getting mentally lost in escort land. So what I mean practically here is that having a casual or part-time job in the real world is generally a good idea for most people. Or if you decide not to actively keep another job, you want to maintain some kind of regular training or upskilling or certification in the real world. It's also a really good idea to keep friends and acquaintances who are not escorts. You don't want to be surrounded by people who have the luxury of going to coffee twice a day and getting their nails done all the time. 2 is save your goddamn money. If you decide to stop work at the age of 35 with 500 grand in savings, you will have so many more options available to you than if you attempt to stop with nothing. You'll also find it much easier to have an abundance mentality. You'll feel like the world has more to offer you, and as a result of having that mentality, it will have more to offer you. And lastly, discipline is the absolute backbone of your ability to hold yourself accountable. And saving money seems to be one of the best and hardest ways to learn this. So if you can learn to save money, you will likely at the same time learn to hold yourself accountable in multiple different ways. Number 3 is to have clearly written goals. Even if at the age of 22, your main motivation behind working is so that you can buy your first ever Prada bag, be clear about it. This way you'll get in the habit of analyzing your own motivations and, more importantly, actually being aware of them. Even better is if your choice to work is driven by a truly meaningful goal or value. It may be that you have this burning desire to start a certain business and you're going to get it off the ground using your escorting money. It has been proven through various and endless studies from Harvard to all sorts of other sources that having actual written goals which are assessed regularly directly correlates with higher levels of success. I've personally had written goals since I was 17 when I first picked up my first sales book written by Brian Tracy. If you're looking for methods on how to set goals, then I suggest you check out his stuff. 4, always be prospecting for new clients. For some reason, there is this mystical fantasy in the industry of escorts of the escort who has so many regulars, she never needs a new client again. And he just pays all her bills and sees her at her whim and at her fancy, and her life goes on magically. Now, that escort is a unicorn, meaning she doesn't exist. And I've never once come across an escort who could truthfully tell me that she wouldn't like more clients. This is a highly transient industry for both workers and clients. If your business isn't growing, then quite simply, it's dying. You will experience periods during your career where client maintenance is a higher priority than client acquisition. However, new clients will always make up a portion of your income. And for most girls, it is more than 50% at all times. At all times, more than 50% of the typical escort's income will come from new clients and new inquiries. So being on the market for new clients will always keep you on your toes. It will also always keep you performing at high levels. Escorting is highly competitive. And even though clients want a reliably high quality experience, they're also often addicted to the variety that they get to enjoy in a sea of new women and sexual experiences. Now, you can counter against that. You can keep your clients coming back and choosing you only if you constantly outperform the competition. And you can do that even if they are 10 years younger than you and 5 kilos lighter, but only if you keep the mentality at the front of your mind of always wanting to perform better and better and always be looking for new clients. And 5 is think long term. You will counteract the entire nature of the industry when you learn to think long term, and it's really quite a problematic nature. You don't build a consistent and reliable business by only being in the moment or working because you ran out of money. We have been conditioned now by our instant society to think that if what we want, we're going to get it now, and not by thinking of what we will need 10 years from now. You are really the only person who can truly enforce this for yourself, and thankfully, it is a skill that you can cultivate. I personally recommend using positive motivation and the hope of a better future to drive you forward. However, if you are someone who is inspired more by fear or pain, then use that. For instance, some high-level athletes are fiercely motivated to perform better by the prospect of losing, rather than the picture of winning. So just find what inspires true action in yourself, which is really whatever leads to results, and use that to drive you. So, now that Jane has implemented all these strategies, she has very successfully succeeded in making all her dreams come true. She knows how to keep herself accountable, and as a result, she's avoided the escort trap for good. Here is a quick summary of how Jane did that. 1, she kept a relevant foot in the real world. 2, she learnt to save her pennies. 3, she had clearly written goals that she assessed and updated regularly. 4, she never stopped growing her business by looking for new clients. And 5, Jane learnt to think long term. Now, what's so great about all of this is that no matter who you are or where you are in life, you can implement all of these strategies. It doesn't matter if you're stuck deep in the jaws of the escort trap, you can do all of these things. Now, if you are in that position, it will be harder and more painful for you to do these things, but only initially. if you can just push past that initial difficult period of change, you will eventually experience what is a very natural snowball effect, and all of this will become easier. My best advice, if you're in this position and you're listening to this video, is to just begin with one strategy. Pick the easiest one and build your way up from that. That's a wrap for today, guys. I really hope you got something out of this video. If you'd like me to make a video on a particular escort topic, then send it my way at isabel@foxgirls.com.au. And remember, the key message of this really for me is it's never too late to change your life. You can take action today. So I hope you like this one, and bye for now.